What's up again, everybody? I'm going to start this video off with a controversial statement to some, but it's just how I feel on the subject. I don't like Kickstarter. I'm not a big fan of Kickstarter. I don't like, from a consumer perspective, I don't like the way that I pay money and then wait for like a year or so and then finally see the thing that I paid money for. That, like, deep down just rubs me the wrong way. And yet I say this knowing that it's a fantastic medium for game creators and content like producers and things like that, for making a game and backing a game, getting funding for said game. I think it's fantastic for that, so I don't really knock the medium from that perspective. But me personally, I don't love it. And yet I've spent like a ton of money on Kickstarter over the past year. It's kind of crazy. I've backed like 5 or 6 things. I know that's like low for some people. That's like rookie numbers for some people, but for me it's like way more than ever. I've backed what? Let's see, I've backed Mage Noir, a fantastic card game, backed that last year, and then most recently, non-card game related, sort of, I backed Tolarian Community College's deck boxes, which are fantastic looking. Absolutely love those. But after those 2 things, everything else I've backed, weirdly enough, has been a tactical card game. And if you don't know what the genre of tactical card game is, that's okay. But I'm going to tell you right now, I think this genre is on the rise within the card gaming space. A tactical card game is a game that you play with cards as the manipulatives, with cards as the tokens or whatever the game pieces you want to say, but you play it on a gridded board of some sort, or with the mindset that positioning and movement matter as much as the power and the synergy of the deck and the cards. And there are 3 specific games that really stuck out to me in the tactical card game space that I backed on Kickstarter over the past 6 months that I think are fantastic examples of how the innovation of this tactical card game subgenre is really pushing the entirety of card gaming forward. And that's why I think we've seen a rise in success rates and like just huge numbers on the Kickstarter successes of these games. And these games were all on Kickstarter. They were all successful on Kickstarter. And I want to show you what these games are, why I like them, why I chose to put my money into them, and what you might get out of them if you're looking for a game like this. So let's get started with our first entry. Alright, first game we're going to talk about is Genesis Battle of Champions, specifically the new set that was released on Kickstarter, which is Genesis Origins, sort of the culmination of everything Genesis Battle of Champions has sort of been building to. And this is an interesting one because Genesis is a game that I've covered on the channel before, and it's a game that I can show you physical cards of, but I figured it would probably be easier for me to use Tabletop Simulator. All 3 games that we're going to be talking about can be played on Tabletop Simulator if you want to get a feel for them before you actually purchase physical cards, but I do recommend that you do purchase physical cards because 1, it supports the game like physically. It supports the game if you buy their product, and 2, the game just plays better physically, like straight up. Like Tabletop Simulator is great because I can do stuff like this and that and that and that and that, but at the end of the day it's clunky at times. Like if I wanted to like stack them and then not stack them, like that aspect is a little clunky. So support the game physically, but I'll show you how the games work if you don't know here on Tabletop Simulator. Now, Genesis, like I said, is a game that has existed for a while. It's a game that you may not think would need a Kickstarter, but they kickstarted this with the intent of like putting this huge final crescendo out into the world, saying this is what Genesis is going to be looking like going forward, and we're going full on distribution crazy with this. And it's a game that was funded in 30 seconds. They were looking for, you know what, I'll put it on the screen probably. They were looking for a meager, I don't know, amount of money, and they blew past it in the hundreds of thousands of Canadian dollars. It's not the freedom bucks, but it's the Canadian dollars, which is probably just as good. I can't actually tell you the conversion rate. I'm sorry, I don't have that on top of the head, but it is still really amazing how quickly they funded this and how completely they funded it. So if you don't know, Genesis is a game that's played on a gridded board, just like all tactical card games to some degree, and movement matters. This is a hero-based game. This is a champion that you could play as. This is Raha, and Raha can shoot arrows I wish I could point to this in addition, but there's a little square thing on top center of the card that shows the range that she can attack. So it's not just about playing your hero and then having weapons and then playing cards down. It's about movement. I can choose to move and then, you know, exhaust my champion so that I can like then attack something from far away. This movement is what makes it a tactical card game, and I can then, of course, grab other things like this little guy, Angel of Retribution, and I can pay resources from one of my decks to play it down and then like attack with it, so on and so forth. So there's general overall like tacticality. I'm making that word up, but I like it. There's tacticality involved in you moving and your opponent moving around the board, positioning in such a way, dealing damage, killing things, shooting across the board. It feels very visceral. This game, Genesis Battle of Champions, feels very much like a one-on-one arena battle where you are duking it out with your opponent. You're both bringing these summons onto the board and trying to throw them at your opponent, which, you know, deals them damage. And again, the whole goal is to reduce your opponent's life to 0. So it plays out like a card game would, but with the added fun and bonus of creating these creatures that can move around the board along with you, and positioning your character in certain ways can give you the advantage that you may not necessarily have found with the normal cards in your deck. So like the better positional player may be able to you know, come out on top after several turns and rounds. So the game is incredibly fun for that respect. It feels very much like a one-on-one battle. It feels very close, up close, even though there are all these squares. And yes, when you play this in person with the actual like play mat, it feels large on the table. The game itself feels a lot more close and intimate, and things are right on top of you and you're having to watch out, and over time, you know, you're losing the aura that you use to pay for things because you're paying for it, and so you don't have as much, and you're running out of resources, but you're trying to get those kills in. All of that happens, all while you're drawing, you know, cards into your hand and playing said cards out onto the board to do different effects. Now again, this is like more tactical and more intimate in nature. Some cards even just like have you move. Like there's a card that's literally just a backflip, and so you do the backflip. And that is unique to this game in that respect. And it's a game that a lot of people have picked up. It has the pedigree already of being successful. They've had Worlds, they've had Nationals, they've had actual in-person tournaments. It's been around since 2017. It's a fantastic game to pick up, and one that you should try if you're into the movement and the one-on-one nature of the game. Next up is a game that I'm sure you've probably heard of. It's actually hard to not have heard of this game over the past like month based on the success that it had in Kickstarter, but this is Sorcery Contested Realm. As you can see, Sorcery, boom, Contested Realm. Look at all these beautiful, beautiful art scattered around. This game is another tactical card game, as you can see by the gridded board, and it's one that plays similarly to Genesis Battle of Champions in that we have our own little hero. And in Genesis, it's called a champion. In here, it's called, in Sorcery, it's called an avatar. And an avatar is your little character that you're moving around and you're using to affect the world. And what differs from this game towards something like Genesis is the overall feeling of creation and discovery and grandeur. It's almost like we took Genesis Battle of Champions, which was very much a one-on-one, tactical, tight, movement-based gameplay, and we just zoomed far out. In zooming out, we see more of the world, we see less of the trees and more of the forest, and that's exactly what Sorcery feels like, because all of these squares on here are currently sort of uncreated, if you will. Your avatar can move and position itself here, but in doing so, it has to discover what this land looks like by taking what's called a sight card from this deck that would be over here, but for some reason doesn't exist right now. I don't know why I looked for it. I'm sorry, I don't know. But you take a sight card from your hand after you've drawn a card from either that or your main deck, and you can play it down. Why did I zoom in there? You can play it down on this next little hex, or this square, I should say. Now, the interesting thing about that is all your site cards give you resources to play from, so the more you move and create like spaces, the more sites you lay down, which give you more resources to play more of your cards. But it's also as though like you're discovering a different portion of the world, and the sites that you lay down may do more than just give you resources. They could also have some effect on the fight ahead, because again, this is a game that's basically you just punch your opponent until they don't have any health, right? That's like the point. The point is like, I'm gonna kill you, and I'm gonna do so with myself or with my cards. And the other interesting thing about this is, yes, it's just like Genesis in the sense that you can basically bring like a creature out and like have it move and attack as well. But in Genesis, I feel like you build up a small number of creatures that can move around, and the game can maybe end pretty quickly. This game is more board game-esque in that you could have tons of things all over the board, and they could all be moving around and doing different things, and some crazy stuff could happen. Again, you're discovering the world as you build it, but then you're also blowing everything up with like powerful cards like this that literally just explode from the point of origin, deal 1 billion damage in all directions, and decimate the entire planet. Right? You can like flood the board with water. You can cast Chain Lightning and it can bounce around on different things. You can have a character that teleports to different squares and like immediately just kills stuff. Okay, like weird things like that can happen. This is a game that is about controlling your space and trying to reduce your opponent's life points, but it does so on a grander scale, right? Like this is literally a thunderstorm. Like you put it on the intersection of 4 locations, and then at the end of your turn you remove a counter from it and it deals 3 damage to all of this stuff, and the thunderstorm can like spread, right? Like things like that can happen in this game. And so yes, it is not just you know, a hero versus hero game. It's also all of these other things that we've mentioned. By the way, it's also got its own unique art style and flair. All of these arts in this game were hand painted. They were physical art that were, you know, then printed onto cards. Yes, there's a portal. I can play this and teleport my person somewhere else. There's a card that lets you build a great wall that people can't get past, and it's incredibly difficult to get your units past it because you have to march them around the wall and then attack whatever you want, right? So like this is the kind of game that Sorcery is. It's a beautiful game if you're into the like old school art aesthetic, which I love. It is unique to itself in that respect, and it obviously crushed its way past its goal on Kickstarter because of all of these things. In fact, both of these games crushed their way past Kickstarter because of these things. We've had Genesis, which has its own unique flashy art style. It's very Eastern mixed in art style. And then of course we have Sorcery here with its own old school aesthetic and just hand-drawn detail, attention to detail. Both of these games fantastic. Both are fantastic if you want a tactical card game that you still have some of those like classic card game tropes where you draw a hand, you hold the cards in your hand, and then you play them down so your opponent doesn't know what you're holding. But there's one more game that we haven't talked about, and it was arguably as fun, if not more fun, than both of these games. And it's a game that you should definitely know about, especially if you're a fan of real big brain tactics. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Legacy's Allure. It is the third and final tactical card game that I backed, and it is tactical in the very sense of the word. Yes, it's the same type of thing where you move your characters from one hex, in this case, to another. There's movement on a gridded board. But this takes it to a different level, takes it to in a different direction completely, in the sense of very much being about almost chess-like strategy. When you move your characters, where you move your characters, and how you actually go about winning the game. Now, yes, this is all tactical. There's cards here. There's effects that you can activate that they can do. There are even like equipment and things like in spells that your characters can access. Like, for example, this guy, Carthul, is the like main dude of this faction. He's like the leader of the faction. And then over here on the human side of things, we've got Tristan, who's the main guy of the faction. But the game doesn't play out like just trying to kill your opponent, right? It's not about like this orc troll or this cave troll running over here and just smashing Tristan in the face and then the orcs win. It's really not about that. What it's about is capturing and holding the center hex at the end of round 7. So it's almost like an asymmetrical card game in the sense that one group is going to be attacking and the other group is going to be defending. Basically, the defending group has to make sure that the attacking group doesn't end with a person on here at the end of round number 7. If they do that, they win. The other way that you could win is just eliminating all of your opponent's stuff. But basically, whoever controls this is going to be the winner of the game at the end of round number 7. So in a way, there's tacticality to it, and there's a different win condition to it than those other games that we've talked about. Not only that, but this game plays out in I don't want to say it's like better, but it plays out so much more tactically than the other two games, in the sense that as you're playing out your turns, as you're playing out the game, your positioning matters so much to keep your opponent from getting to this hex, okay? To keep your opponent from taking out your little minion characters here. And then there's no resource system in this game either. You start with everything on the field. You start with everything in play. Everything is at your disposal. And over the course of you moving your characters, your resources are how many movements you can make, how many attacks you can make, where you place your your forces. Can you build some sort of a wall here to keep your opponent from moving their characters around to the back and then hitting your main guy because he's powerful and also kind of squishy? Or, are you going to immediately park some big guy on the center and try to keep your opponent from breaking through and killing him? How do you plan on counterattacking? Are you going to use your flying little creatures to fly around the side and try to snipe out some of their weak but very powerful magic users? Or maybe you're going to try and take out, like with this flying and charging guy, you're going to come across here, take that guy out and smash into their archers who are going to hang back and try to shoot from afar. All of this plays out like a war game would. To a certain degree, those other card games do the same thing. They have ranged attacks, they have melee attacks, physical attacks, magic attacks. All of those things exist in the other games, but this game doubles down on all of it and plays like chess with extra character abilities. And I find that so incredibly fascinating. It is so much more like tactical chess. And there's a lot of thought that goes into it. There's a lot of just general strategies that kind of translate from other strategy games like Go and abstract games like chess. The idea of trading pieces and removing them from the board because you have maybe an advantage on numbers. It's advantageous for me to trade this guy if it means taking out his most powerful unit. This might be worth more than that. This guy has, at the very top right, he costs 7 gold to put into your army, whereas this one costs 9 gold. Maybe it's a bad trade for me to give this guy up to take that guy. Or maybe this is the linchpin strategy winning thing in the game, and maybe it is worth it. Like, these kind of considerations are what drew me to this game, and getting to play this with the creator, I was floored by the way it played. And not only that, this is a game that you don't collect. It's a game that you don't deck build for to a certain degree. Instead, at the beginning of the game, you actually draft it. You have a timer and you have a certain gold count. You're presented the ability to just pick from all of these different cards with cost, like gold count costs in the top, and you can't exceed a certain amount of gold. So here, for example, you can't exceed that amount of gold, and you build your army. You position them out here, and your opponent does the same thing, and then you just go. So essentially, it's more of a board game in that sense. You buy this product, you play it on the board, and you have all the pieces to it. It's more of that type of board game than a collectible game, which is why I don't want to call it a collectible card game, because it's really not, in a way. It's not essentially a collectible card game. It is more of a tactical, just straight up strategy game, war game, if you will, because it does have a lot of commonalities with Warhammer 40k and heck, even chess to a certain degree, which is sort of like a war game, than other just straight up card games. And it is a game that I highly recommend that you try and pick up and mess around with. Again, all three of these games can be played on Tabletop Simulator, and all three are incredibly fun and unique to themselves. So these are the 3 tactical card games I have invested in personally. I've picked up a Kickstarter version of all of these games, and it's all games that I plan on playing with my friends and with my family because I think they are all fantastic in their own right. And I think tactical card games, again, have a spot in this world, in this card game world, because they have all of this unexplored design space from the perspective of moving your pieces around a board rather than just building in synergies into a deck, drawing cards, and playing them down. And so it's for that reason I feel like people are starting to flock to this as a fine, wonderful palate cleanser to a standard Flesh and Blood style card game where you have a hand of cards and you play them down. This is a great change of pace. These games are all awesome. If you enjoyed this video, if you found something useful or insightful out of it, feel free to leave a comment down below telling me which game you think is most intriguing or you're most excited for, and feel free to press a button to make a number go to another number. Always press red buttons. If you press a red button, that number will change. That's pretty cool. And pressing red buttons can't end badly. It probably could. Don't press every red button, but press that one. As always, everybody, thanks for watching.